Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Western Gallery. As much as I wish you all would be here today with us in person, we are still pleased to be able to offer you our BFA Artist Talk series for the Fall 2020 exhibition, Insight, a New Realism. And it's especially a pleasure to be here today with one of our artists, and we'll be showcasing different artists this week in the gallery in front of their work. So I hope that you all get some sense of being here with us today. So today I have Sarah Kindl, who's with us, and we're just going to be having a conversation about Sarah's work. And it's really, really powerful installation. And so we're going to try to break down some of the themes, the process, the materials that we have here. And it's going to be a really rich conversation. And as you'll see, my colleague is on the other side of things hosting this Zoom. Thank you, Chris. And if you have any questions that come up while we're talking, please use the chat function and type that in. And we may pause and answer that if it's related to what we're talking about. Or we have about 10 minutes allotted at the end of this talk that we're going to do some Q&A from you, audience members. So thanks again for being here and being present. Please do ask questions. Utilize this time that we have with Sarah. Sarah's graduated. She doesn't have to be here. So we're really happy that Sarah has set aside this time to be with us today. So again, welcome in those of you that are just coming into the Western Gallery up at Western Washington University, part of the College of Fine and Performing Arts. And thank you to all of those that have made this event happen. And we're gonna go ahead and get started in our artist talk today with Sarah Kindl. And we are sitting currently in front of her piece called Double Wide. And I don't know if that's a good starting point, Sarah. Maybe you could tell us why is this installation that we're sitting in front of called Double Wide? What does that title mean? Break it down a little bit for us.
It's kind of a humorous name for the trailer that I grew up in. I grew up in a trailer park, and just I use a lot of humor in my work, and I thought it would just be kind of like a cute little like double entendre, like in reference to like just being someone who is like a little bit larger. I'm kind of like I feel like everything in my life is like it acknowledges that, and like I incorporate it into my work, and like I kind of want to use like body positivity but humor to like influence some of my work.
Yeah, and I know our Zoom capabilities, we don't have the highest quality, but today, you know, some of the details that we want to bring out are these moments of humor that Sarah presents in here in this installation. So some of the details our audience might not be able to see are some of the books or the posters. And I don't know if anyone can see these massive rodents that you've crafted. So maybe could you pick out a few details in the installation behind us and tell us why they're important to this installation?
I think some of the most important things are the paper mache creatures, and that their size is larger than life, and it's a humorous way to kind of acknowledge some of the things that I experienced as a child. Some of it was like a little bit traumatizing, but also like being able to look at that with like something that was like kind of humorous, and that like, you know, they're kind of gross but really big, and also like kind of cartoonish.
Yeah.
And that like I'm able to interact with them, and without them being too like hyper realistic and like kind of being frightening, you know. So that and just the combination of things being hand printed and being real, and elevating the sense of like whimsy or fun or not completely realistic.
Yeah. So you can't tell from here because Sarah's done such a wonderful job in her printmaking skills, but the walls that you're seeing, talk us through what we're looking at, because that's not actually wood.
No, it's not wood paneling. I used laminate wood to do relief printing, and so I had two large panels that I coated and I printed repeatedly, and then I pieced them all together to kind of be similar to the kind of wood paneling that you'd see in like a prefabricated home from the 60s or 70s. Yeah, and then I used wood block printing to make like little electrical fixtures.
Yeah, they're really fantastic. I wish you all could see it.
Thank you.
And you know, I think there's something to say. You could have bought fixtures. You could have gone and bought wood paneling. But the fact that you decided to have your hand and to create all those nuanced details really gives you the sense of controlling this space. And that's something I want to come to. So backing up a little bit, you've recreated your childhood home here for us. Talk us through, why did you decide in your BFA, you know, culminating year, your culminating project, why was this the work that you decided to make? And break it down for us a little bit.
I guess throughout my career at Western, I've had very particular like memories or feelings that I've wanted to try and recreate. And the BFA program has allowed me to like kind of focus some of those things, feelings that I've had throughout like my adolescence and, you know, as an adult. And it's allowed me to make this structure and like kind of meditate on these like thoughts and feelings that a lot of it is just like I've tried to like kind of like suppress. And so just having this moment of like making each individual panel, I feel like I think about my childhood and I think about all of the things that I didn't have control of, and that I can recreate this environment that I do, and I can create this kind of like the sense of agency, and really just it's hard to describe.
Yeah. But you're like, you know, what I'm really drawn to is you saying, you know, even the repetitive process, you're gaining the sense of control through the process of making, and it becomes a much more of like the self and the psychological and identity, you know, creation, right? It's like you're working through themes that have been a part of your life forever, and so doing repetitive work seems fitting. Seems, you know, the printing, the screen printing that you're doing here.
It is meditative.
Absolutely.
Like, I feel like I will focus on a particular feeling, and I'll be able to reconcile some of those things that made me really uncomfortable that I try to avoid, like when I'm in public speaking with other people. You know, you'll have a personal conversation with somebody and you don't want to be like, all these things happened to me. And like, this is just a way for me to find a balance and to speak about it, but not just like blurt it all out.
What do you think, or as an artist, what does it mean? And, you know, we're sitting in the gallery and we're surrounded by your peers who some of them are working in similar childhood spaces or traumas or identity work. What do you think it means as an artist, as yourself, to put together work that's so steeped in your identity? I mean, it's really vulnerable, right? You could have chosen to do something beautiful and easy, but what does it do for you as an artist to start and launch your career as an artist with such rich work in your identity?
I feel like it puts me in a space where I can create something new that isn't completely bogged down by something that is from childhood. I feel like a lot of us are touching on those issues in this show, and that we're developing like this plane where we can like create something that is about like current like issues. It's not just like the past, and like I do use a lot of nostalgia and stuff, but I feel like I just needed that opportunity to kind of get everything out and then be able to move forward. And
something I think you've shared with me that's really important here is, you know, you've made it as, and I know our viewers can't see it particularly well, but we're placed in the middle of the gallery. This isn't butted up, you know, with walls surrounding it. We've created it as, or Sarah's created this as like a freestanding model. So the falsicity, you know, this is not a real place, is very present. But I've had so many people that walk by and they're like, I recognize this, or this feels like home to me. I think there's something really rich about that. But I think this idea of it as a freestanding model is really, really, really striking. So along that note of me just mentioning, when people have come in, that they've been really drawn to this, and they walk in and they're like, I feel this. What do you hope people experience when they come in here? Do you want them to come sit down? How do you want them to experience this? And what do you want them to see initially and then walk away with?
I want them to recognize those familiar parts of of this installation and in their life. I feel like there are a lot of things that are very common in homes, and like just a lot of the like the iconography, the religious aspect, the just the kind of clutter that exists, and it feels like lived in. I mean, at least to me, and maybe it might to other people. But I want them to come in and sit down and to interact with the environment and like think about their home and their memories and like what that might mean for them. And because like I feel like even though a lot of this is influenced by some negative like life experience, that like it's a very full like it's rich, it's complex, it's not just one thing. And like I might feel really happy or I might feel sad, and like it's a full spectrum of emotion.
Right. And I think you've shared with me how you've worked really hard to merge, you know, your childhood perspective, but also very much to who you are today, and how this space has been important to you. And I think we should note, is this space still existing? Can you go visit this space?
No, my home was torn down like maybe 15 years ago or more. But it's weird because we have family friends that live across the street from where that trailer used to be. And like, I'll go visit and I'll just stand there, and like, it's been reconstructed since then, but it's completely different. It's new. And knowing that there are all these like really like intense feelings connected to this one like spot that no longer exists it's such an odd feeling. And being able to recreate this, and although it might not be exact, it has a lot of like the emotional ties, that like
that's really dynamic to think through spaces that we can't access anymore. And I think about right now, and especially for those that are home with COVID-19, there's a lot of spaces we cannot access and get to, and we miss and we long for. So I think there's another element to your work that has added value to this season of life that we're in without even, you know, thinking through. I mean, you were thinking through this space is important to you, but now people are only in their homes, or they can't go to some of their homes or other family places. I think the theme here is very powerful with what's going on today. So speaking of COVID and what this year has been like, can you just tell us really briefly, like, your BFA year got derailed pretty significantly. And for the other BFA artists that are all nodding that are listening, you know, and I want other artists and other people and students to hear a little bit about this process. This show was originally supposed to be open in May, but because of the pandemic, the university was very much closed and we couldn't do that. And let alone back in March, when you were supposed to be working in your studios and going to places and gathering materials, all of that was shifted for you, and it was very limiting to be on campus. So, and also major congratulations to get this work done, right? And in this season of so many things being ripped from under you. So could you share with us briefly what this year was like for you, you know, with the pandemic and everything else that's happened politically in this world, to be creating a body of work?
I felt somewhat isolated, and kind of stuck with these thoughts, which it was good, but it was also kind of frightening to not have anybody to like speak out to. And you know, well, everyone was available to talk to. It's just it felt so disconnected, and to create this environment that was so consuming, I did feel like I was transported back almost, and I felt like I was still 12 again, and it was a very odd feeling. But I feel like it was difficult. I mean, on a technical on the technical side of it, like just getting resources was very difficult, and finding things like going to even the hardware store to find supplies. There was just very specific way of doing everything, and I might not have known how to go about starting that.
Usually you have a team of people that are your resources, and I think for those of you that aren't familiar with the BFA year, I mean, leading up to this, you were with your team your cohort
Constantly.
all the time, you know, and you guys were doing group critiques all the time. You're always in conversation. Your studios were close to each other. So all of a sudden to have that rift from you and to be doing this in an isolated means is very new, very different, very challenging. So it's just an extreme success to see this work coming together and see these artists here today, which is really, really exciting. And I was gonna also say, you know, in regards to that isolation, yeah, and for you to be thrown into a place, a site,
Yeah.
you know, while you're working, it's really, really fascinating. So congratulations again on getting this work done.
Thank
you know,
you.
it's really magnificent. So I was trying to think of, you know, when, I don't know if you got to it, but when someone walks away from this installation, they've walked around it and they've observed it and they've gained some familiarity, or maybe to some people who never grew up in a trailer home, they don't know this space, but they recognize it as a domestic space. How would you want someone to walk away with this, with a different knowledge of like the art making process and the capabilities of art to recreate such spaces?
I feel like I want people to kind of take whatever they want from it. I don't want to like try and project any one particular thing. I want people to experience it as if like they were watching a film, and they'll notice something that is familiar. But like I feel like this particular place is very much like going into like a Sofia Coppola film, and there are all these little details, and you might feel kind of sad or like kind of heartwarmed by some things. But I really want to leave it open to the viewer to like interpret it how they will.
Yeah, and I think it's really powerful because before this, would you say you were just a print, like you called yourself a printmaker, but now you're an installation artist.
Yeah, and performance.
And we haven't talked about that. So I think I would love to hear if we were open in our normal occupancy and it was a normal season. I know that you wanted to do some live performance. Could you tell us a little bit about what that would have looked like and how we could have experienced, you know, if we had more of an audience here and what that would have been?
Well, I had done a little live stream on Instagram, and I usually with the kind of performance work that I've done with this installation and others, I've like embodied these characters, and they're like me working through these like ideas of what like I understand femininity to be, or just these like strong feelings or fears that I've had. And like so I'll have very particular costumes and makeup, and I'll interact with the environment and kind of let it influence my behavior, and kind of think back of like when I was like 12, what did I see this person as, you know? So it would be like that right now if we were to still have a show.
Is there music? Do you narrate during that time? Like what's going on?
There's interaction. There's like talking to different people coming in. There's I wanted initially to do like a cam show and to kind of like touch on like this idea of like voyeurism and seeing people in their homes doing very like personal things, and what it's like for a viewer to see something like that, but like actually stand there.
And it's live and activated. Live. Yeah, so that's a whole other element that unfortunately we don't get to see of your work, and that's major. You know, if you look at the history of performance art, and in the 60s, 50s, 60s, they start to realize the importance of the viewer and interacting with the viewer within that. So if you're saying you would have been in here, and there would have been music, and you would have been interacting with the viewers in some regard. And so would you have been set in like a character? You talked about a costume.
Right, yeah.
And like responding as your childhood self, as yourself now?
As different ideas of what I felt like being a woman was like when I was 12.
Okay.
You know, I saw all of these like ideals of like femininity. I saw like these pictures of like, you know, like heavy metal magazine girls, and you know, they were very like voluptuous and like very loud, and I always wondered like, is that what being a woman is? You know, I always watched a lot of horror movies, and I thought like there was a very specific way to be a woman, and so it kind of made me feel conflicted because I never felt like I could actually be that thing.
Yeah.
And so those performances are really me kind of acting out those ideas.
And then talking through it with viewers, or like interacting in that persona, which is really fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry we can't do that. You know, that's something that I hope that you can continue to do as this work moves forward in transition as you start your career.
Thanks.
As an artist. So I just want to pause really quick and remind you all, if any of you have questions regarding what Sarah and I are talking about, sitting in front of her very complex multimodality, this is a very much mixed media installation. If you have questions about the themes we're talking about, the process, the materials, if there's something that you can't completely make out in the video and you want to know what it is, go ahead and put a question on the chat and we will try to get to that.
We do.
For now,
we do have a couple, one related to something you touched on, which was folks would like to see some detail from the installation, from the things on the walls. And we're wondering if we could make photos or a video pan or some kind of a virtual walkthrough available either on our website or if Sarah has a website, so we could tell folks where they could see more detail on that. Is that something we have now or something we can make?
That is definitely something that we could make. And this talk is recorded. And so I've already been thinking about towards the end of it or in the beginning, adding some additional visuals. Like when we're talking about maybe the critters, I could populate that part of the talk with a detailed image that's higher resolution. So in time, maybe by next week, we will have a recording available that'll have some supplemental images that we will put in that'll have some higher resolution moments for you all to dive into some of these details that we're talking about. Like you probably can't see the posters that are on the wall over here. So we will definitely add that. Thank you for asking. And we're doing our best with what we have here today, but we wanted to make sure you could see Sarah's face and the general idea of the work. So details will be coming in the recording and we'll have that available. And my magnificent pal, Chris, will help us get that out of either a YouTube channel. Is that right, Chris? We usually have our recorded videos available through the College of Fine and Performing Arts Facebook.
Correct. Yeah, we'll get the finished videos onto YouTube and our Facebook channels, and you'll be able to link to them from the websites. We also have a question that someone asked of Sarah, which is, can you tell us a little bit more about the screen printing and relief printmaking, and also why did you choose to go that route with your BFA studies?
Sure. I started off doing printmaking at Whatcom, and when I transferred over, I felt like the process of making prints and relief print was very satisfying. I feel like I do well with repetition. And so a lot of it is repetition, reprinting the same two laminate panels over and over again it helped me like kind of focus my intentions and really like while I'm just going through that process, like think about what I want to create because I feel like my mind is constantly racing in what I want to do and I can't really like stop and focus, and it forced me, and that's what printmaking does, is it forces me to be intentional with all of my work. I forgot the second part.
It was like, why did you choose that in this BFA process? And I would say to add on that, I'm glad they asked that question, because I would say one of the first things you did to make this happen was the prints, right? That was kind of an instigator of like, oh, I can make this feel like a faux reality, in the printmaking process. So that's kind of the core to this, even though I'd also say you were an installation artist, but the screen printing kind of anchored that process, and that repetition.
I like trompe-l'oeil and things that are supposed to look kind of real but not really be what the material that they're suggesting it is, and so that like kind of break from reality, and like it forces people to kind of interact with the environment differently, and so that's why I wanted to do that for my BFA project.
Well, you've done it and it's seamless, I think it would take people a lot of time to recognize that this is screen printing. So for those of you that came in late, the screen printing, the core element here is the wood panels that you see on the outside.
Relief.
Screen is relief printing.
It's okay.
The relief printing that you see on the side that really creates this environment. Without it, it wouldn't be the same. And if you would have used actual wood, it wouldn't be the same. But I love that it's the artist's hand in every single, element of this. Okay, Chris.
There's a question now that you've graduated, what have you been making, or what's next for you and your art practice?
A lot of this, because we haven't had this, we're waiting for now until the show, but I've been just planning how to put this in the gallery. And a lot of the work that I've been doing over the summer has been finishing this up and doing small details. But I'm trying to do more like paper mache and make larger paper mache just types of construction. I'm doing a lot of weird stuff and experimenting.
Yeah. Are they animals? Are they objects? Are they abstract?
Objects.
So objects one might be familiar with, that you're like pushing the envelope of scale and...
Very, very large objects. I'm thinking about like just large dumpsters and like things that you see in everyday life, but like on a very large scale.
Okay, that's exciting. So you're moving to a more sculptural use of paper. So to go from relief printing to paper mache at a large scale, that's really, really dynamic. So Sarah, you're still living here in Bellingham right now.
Yes.
Do you have plans, do you want to consider an MFA? Do you want to work in museums and galleries and kind of go a different route? Like what's your ideal, in a year or two?
The ideal would be to work in an art museum or a gallery. I love the environment and being able to see so many different types of work. It's like, it makes me really happy to like see that everyone has their own different way of like constructing things and talking about personal issues or different types of content. But that, and then creating more installations is definitely my goal.
Yeah, well, I think you're on the right track, to say the least. You've created a really immersive environment, at least for myself. I'm here physically, and I'm really getting to experience it, and I feel absorbed in whenever I'm near. And it's amazing. People kind of just like jump right into this. So we have one more question.
Yeah, do we have time for just a brief question here? Okay. Can you talk a bit more about scale and how the scale of the installation and the objects were determined in your making for this piece?
I had originally used my BFA studio to determine the scale, just because of the size constraints of that studio. I mean, it was fairly large, but I feel like with making the panels and everything and storing them, I had to think about, that to define the scale of the actual work. But I wanted something that is livable. It felt like it could be like a portion of your house, and to kind of really envelop you and to make you think about like smaller domestic spaces. I really like the idea of a lot of like visual stimulation in small spaces, so you kind of sit and feel like enveloped by it. And like there's a lot going on for such a small space. It could be like, your bedroom or something.
And you had mentioned this earlier in case someone came in late. The scale of a lot of this too, especially the bugs and critters, relate to your childhood lens that you're envisioning this in and coming back to, right? So amplifying the size of the rodents and the cockroach, that's on the back, that's crawling on the wall.
I mean, it feels like, like I remember as a kid, it felt like they were so large and they were everywhere that, that it was very overwhelming.
Yeah, it's powerful. Even to like hear you react to that, your facial expression, you were like, they were really big. So there you go, the reasoning. So it's amazing as an artist, you got to control that. You could have put little cockroaches, but instead you made this massive one to really remind us what that, that feeling was for you. It's much more than just a, model representation of it. But that was a really great question, because I think model and scale is really key in this work. And as you experience it and walk around it and move within it, it all plays a really full narrative aspect of this. So we do have to wrap up, and I want to thank you all for your questions. Those were really right on to the things that Sarah and I were talking about, and we got to talk through some really important parts. I think Sarah and I could talk about her work for a long time, but we do need to wrap up. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Congratulations on this installation, getting it up, finishing your BFA year in such a tumultuous season year. And as we continue in such a shaky place, I'm so thankful that you have this work here and set up, and all our support from Western and the College of Fine and Performing Arts to you as you move forward. But we're happy to have this here for this season, and to celebrate you with audiences like that have joined us today. If you all have more questions about the installation or the exhibition, my information is on our website at the Western Gallery, tammy.landis@wwu.edu. You can email me directly. I'd be happy to chat, or if you need to get connected with Sarah to ask more questions about her work. So thank you all for joining us today in this, our first ever virtual BFA Artist Talk series here at the Western Gallery at Western Washington University. It's been such a pleasure to be with Sarah and to be with you all. And thank you for setting aside this time. And please do tune in to our other Artist Talks, our artist series that we have this whole week. We're gonna have one right now, quickly following. We're gonna have a little pause, and then I'm gonna be introducing our next artist. But please do cue in and register for the other talks and spread the news and celebrate these artists and do whatever you can on social media to talk about this exhibition and such dynamic artists like Sarah. So thank you all. Hi everyone, welcome to our BFA Artist Talk series here at the Western Gallery up at Western Washington University. Our next Artist Talk is not going to be live. Madison Dowling lives now in Portland and wasn't able to be with us in person, but thankfully we've been able to record a video when she was here installing, so mind some of the background noises of ladders and other things that are happening in the gallery. But you will see Maddie in conversation with myself in this video, talking through different themes that come up in her work. And we're so pleased that Maddie was able to display this body of work and get it up, especially being graduated and being down in Portland. So this will be a virtual video that we'll be playing. It's about 15-20 minutes long. If you have any questions, you're welcome to put it in the chat box, and I am available to answer them on the Zoom chat if you wanna ask a few more clarifying details. But thanks to Maddie for your work, and congratulations on getting it up. It's been such a pleasure working with you and all the BFA artists. So just a reminder, this is a part of our BFA Artist Talk series here at the Western Gallery, and the exhibition is called Insight, a New Realism, and you can see our website for more details. And afterwards, we will be finished with our series today, and take a look at our calendar, and please do register for some of the others that'll be going on this week. So without further ado, I'm going to move forward and letting my colleague Chris go ahead and play the video for Madison Dowling of her Artist Talk here at the Western Gallery. Thank you.
My name is Madison Dowling, and I'm a printmaker and a mixed media artist. So this series came from my obsession with 60s Life magazines. I had always used collage as a basis for other forms of artwork, whether that be screen printing, woodblock, or even just drawing. I would make a collage prior to making the final piece. And then I realized that it was actually my favorite form of art making, so I tried to incorporate all of the things I love into one. I sort of built them one at a time, which was an interesting process, and it became sort of a timeline of events. But I started with this fascination with the 60s, the 50s and 60s, and that time period in relation to alcoholism. And through my own personal experiences, I reflected that through the medium of these this time period of advertisements. So I started collecting these magazines when I was 13 or 14. There was an antique store at the end of my street, and I bought my first one for $15 for one magazine. I mean, obviously I knew that magazines existed in the time period, had that connotation of those advertisements, like the housewife in the kitchen and, you know, the vacuum cleaners and all the gross looking food. But I think the reason I bought it, because there was this beautiful picture of Marilyn Monroe, and I was like a young girl, and I was like, oh, cool, like Marilyn Monroe, like in the time period, and then I brought it home, and collage was the first sort of art making I had done. I was going through like a really difficult transition, and I turned this woodshed in my backyard into a little art studio. So I was, and I hadn't really drawn. I didn't really know much about like art or thought I had any talent, but making collage was something fun and time consuming. So in the nuclear family, it was interesting because I had never really connected my own personal beliefs with the family dynamic and the magazines that I was using. But very quickly it became clear that especially the act of like destroying or ripping these almost time capsules of this idea of the nuclear family was healing for me in some ways. Especially as a young woman, sort of trying to find out what a modern idea of family looks like, and also connecting back to my mother and grandmother and the ideals that they subconsciously taught me, and also society subconsciously taught me. The nuclear family piece is an anchor in the sense that it is connecting the series to the 60s, but also blending it with ideas of addiction and connecting it to, and sort of bridging the gap between a modern look at addiction and that era, looking at that era in comparison. So this revelation actually came like after I sort of started making this series, but I think for myself and a lot of people, when they think about the 50s and 60s, there is this sort of idealized perfection, and especially in the example of Life magazines, it was, you know, this perfect family, the perfect house, nothing was going wrong, everybody was happy. But that was also a time period where addiction and like, you know, lots of internal issues were coming about, and not as much in this series, but other collage works I've done have looked at, you know, there was the Vietnam War happening at this time, and all of these underlying issues that were kind of blanketed in this perfection. So I wanted to use that as like a thread to connect all of the things that are unspoken about addiction, and also the sort of glorification of alcohol. And you know, in all these magazines, it's like the nuclear mother and alcohol advertisements, and that always kind of struck me funny because we don't see those advertisements now. Like, there's no cigarette ads, or maybe there's like one alcohol ad in a magazine. But back then it was every other page, and so there was just this overall feeling of like alcohol equals good, family equals good sort of mentality throughout these magazines. So this series is really important to me. I think when I was making it, I couldn't see the full vision of how it was changing me in my art practice. I thought I was just, you know, completing my BFA work and, you know, looking forward to the show. But I realized that this series actually reminded me how much I love collage work. I think because I went the route of taking art in an academic sense, like going and getting an art degree, I really was focused on, the technical side. Like I love printmaking, and I was really drawn to printmaking because can be such an arduous process. And I think as a young mind, I really associated time and effort and process to equal fine art. And so I was sort of obsessed with, getting all these technical skills and working really hard for a final product. And not that these weren't extremely difficult to make and create, but when I sit down to make a collage, I can pop out something I'm really happy with in 15 minutes. And I always was sort of ashamed of that. I thought, oh, that's not real art because I just slapped some paper down. But seeing these as a whole and this sort of gentle meld between collage, digital alteration, screen printing, really reminded me that, if I'm creating it and, enjoying this process, then it is art, and I can continue to do that. And so it's only been a couple months since finishing this, but I have exclusively just been making collages, and my mental health is like very happy about it. When I first thought of the diptych idea, I was imagining it as like a magazine spread, because a lot of these images were full advertisement pages. Like there was no text. It was just 5 years with the nails was an advertisement for a hardware store. And I just thought that was such an incredible...
The background image, just the nails, no chairs.
Yes, just the background image was so interesting. It's very rare to see like just a full page image advertisement. So I wanted them to be like opening a magazine and sort of digesting these concepts, like not that I am necessarily advertising anything in each specific diptych, but I do think they relate to each other, and you can understand them as a single entity, but then also the whole series as sort of like a magazine. Like you're flipping through, read a story, flip to the next page, read a different story. But okay, 5 years is probably the most personal diptych in this series. I think it all relates to my experience, but 5 years is the most significant. The piece on the left of the diptych, the collage piece, is really referencing just like the pain and isolation of alcoholism. I wanted to kind of create a more chaos in this piece and darkness than the rest of them. It's less colorful, and it's a little bit more chaotic in its imagery. But this was actually the first collage that I made for this series, and it was just a raw representation of my personal experience and also experiences that have been shared with me in relation to addiction. And it's diptych with the nails. Well, recently I just celebrated 6 years of sobriety, but when I made this piece, I had 5 years. And I was drawn to the background image because the nails were in sets of fives as tally marks almost. And I got sober in a program where, we celebrate time sober, and, it was sort of this counting down the months and years. And And the chairs also represent that sort of community program. But I think that it's been interesting to hear people's thoughts about this series, because obviously I'm working from a very personal place, but I think because it is advertisement oriented, people can project themselves onto the pieces, which I really wanted to have that.
A universal understanding.
Yeah. I do feel, it feels intense to share how personal these are, because I think I could get away with, this is a wide concept about addiction, but as a young artist, I think my only tether to the art world is through my reality right now. It's sort of the only vessel that I have to create. So when I was making this piece, I had something shift drastically in my life, so it only felt right to create work about this as, yes, to get my degree, but more so to process this change that I was experiencing, because I was pretty isolated and didn't have anyone really to talk to about my experience. So creating these was really I think the only way that I could process that shift in my life. Some background is when I first started making collage, I exclusively used an X-Acto knife and would perfectly cut out every single edge, every single image I wanted to include in my piece. And within the last year, I started ripping them. I don't know why I started doing that, but it created this human connection to it. Like I had ripped it out of the page, or even the viewer had ripped it out of the page or the magazine, which I found really, was more accessible. Like someone could relate to accidentally ripping something out of a book. But in this series, the rips were really important to me because these are digital prints. So in the original collages, you could see the tears, you could see the live edge of that paper, and it almost was 3D to an extent. So I wanted to make sure that they did not look flat and clean and perfect, because I was already losing the texture of the original collage. And I think in 5 years and Whisper, it almost adds a veil of information. The image underneath, you can't see it, and there's something on top and underneath and crossing over, and it sort of adds to the narrative of chaos that I was going for. So these were original collages and full-page advertisements that I had ripped straight up out of these magazines, and they were originally 11 by 14, I believe. So what I did was I scanned them with some tracing paper to knock back some of the bright colors, and I digitally printed them on photo paper to create the scale that they are. And then I screen printed on some of them. I added another layer of paper to some of them. And with most of them, I added this silver ink that catches the light to sort of create a different dynamic as you look at them. But they are, photo paper with screen print ink on top of them. I really feel like Insight, A New Realism relates to this work beyond what I could have, created a title for this show. I think this body of work could be looked at very plainly, and people can relate to it. 60s imagery, it's, there's some elements of this and elements of that. But I do believe that it connects to my original intent, which was to create a thread between the 60s reality in relation to alcoholism and a more modern reality of that, and sort of looking deeper into these different time periods that we're living in, and how our personal lives and personal experiences are so shifted. I think also with the elements of collage, creating this idea of new realism, sort of pushing the boundaries of what is personal versus academic, and how there is a connection to be made there. And I found it incredibly interesting. People that don't know me personally or don't know my work very well have looked at this, and I have gotten the widest array of understandings. So I would hope that people would be able to project themselves into this timeline and look at their own relationship with this imagery. If they don't connect to the 60s, I think there's still relatable imagery throughout that, like in Weight, there is something very, I think there's something relatable to this idea of a scale and this sort of balance and choice that comes with the other piece in the diptych. I hope that people can just create their own narrative with it, because I have a very personal connection to each piece, and I know exactly how I read everything, but I have been pleasantly surprised by the array of understanding that people feel from this series.